Hello, thank you for your time once again, Jozefien.
Very happy to be here.
So we will directly start our questions. So let's start with the democratizing music topic. So rather than democratizing music access, playlists seem to reinforce traditional industry dynamics through created catalog dominance. How do you interpret this paradox within the streaming environment?
We start immediately with a very complex question with many different dimensions. Indeed, the concept of the use of playlists in the streaming age has a lot of different consequences. And the first important point to make there is that there's different types of playlists. And you have the playlists that are curated by actual people. The playlists that are curated by Spotify, by people that are working there. And then you also have the algorithmic playlists, whereby you use, for example, like the number radio. You start with one number and then things start from there on out. And specifically in the context of the algorithmic playlists, some things seem to be happening that give rise to a bit of uneasiness. Like, for example, the question, exactly is it determined next number will be on the number radio, and can you, for example, use your leverage as a big player in order to ensure that your song is going to come up more, using, for example, the discovery mode, whereby you say, okay, I accept a lower payout per stream in return for a more favorable treatment in the context of algorithmic playlists. That are things whereby me as a lawyer who with a specific interest in the music industry, hard for musicians. That's where I sometimes ask questions, and indeed it's a paradox, because on the one hand, people who listen to music should be applauded, and it's good that people listen to music, and it's good that people pay for a streaming subscription instead of just download illegally and listen to music illegally online. That's a good thing. However, we always need to think about where exactly the money is going, and how we, as lawyers, can make sure that the fairest way of revenue distribution can take place. And I'm not convinced that algorithmic playlists are a good way to make that happen.
Sure.
Okay, the second question is about artist and label services platforms. They claim to empower creators, and do you believe they offer a genuine alternative to traditional label deals, or are they simply a rebranding of old dynamics?
Again, a question without a simple yes or no answer. I think artists and label services are a good evolution, in the sense that the spectrum of possibilities for artists is just way bigger. Basically, if you want a certain service only, then it's possible to choose that certain service only, and that will allow you to keep more revenue from the music to yourselves. However, it's a choice that has to be made consciously. So if you want for a label to take an important place in the music branding process, then you need to know what consequences are accorded to it. So the democratization of the music making process and the spectrum of possible services that are available to me are a good thing. However, it's dependent on whether artists make a conscious decision in that context. As long as it's a conscious decision, to me, it's okay. And for the record, I'm not against the major labels, for example, right? I think they do have an important place to occupy in the music industry landscape, and throughout the past decades, they've done a lot of good things as well. So that is maybe a point that I would like to make. However, it's true that they keep more of the music industry revenues than the artist and label services. In that context, you can't really blame them for acting like a company, as they are a company, right? So it's always a very nuanced story. I would be the last person to say, okay, the major labels don't go there because they take all of your money. I would say, think about what you want, and on that basis, make a conscious decision, and the law will take off the most unfair aspect of the potential imbalance in bargaining position that exists between artists and their commercial counterparties. However, that's dependent on knowledge of the legal framework on the part of musicians and also effective enforcement. And in my book, I do note that in terms of enforcement of the legal framework, there's still some steps to be taken, a margin for improvement, as it were.
And what about these streaming payout models, like the current pro rata streaming payout model, the links found intention from artist support? So how viable is the proposed shift to a user-centric system in addressing this? What are the obstacles from switching from pro rata to user-centric?
So indeed, user-centric, I like it. So it's the question of where does your money go to in terms of your streaming subscription? Does it go proportionately to this big batch of streams that is being made at the platform level, or is it linked to your own subscription? I'm a fan of the second model, indeed, if only because people already think that it's happening, right? If I listen to Gustav Mahler's Second Symphony all day long, then I would expect for my money to go to the orchestra that's playing that symphony, right? It seems like a logical, instinctively good thing to do. However, it hasn't materialized in practice a lot so far. I know that Deezer has been a very big fan of implementing it, but that other players have been a bit more hesitant to accept it. And I think it's mainly because of the uncertainty, because there's been a lot of different studies saying like, if we do user-centric, then genre X or Y will be more popular, and then the local artists will be more popular, and this will shift. And then other studies say it's not going to change anything. It will be just a storm in a glass of water, figuratively speaking. So we don't really know for sure. And that is a big point about all of these shifts in streaming. Depending on who you ask, you will have a different answer. And that's obviously for an impartial bystander such as myself, who doesn't have any financial interest in the music industry whatsoever. To me, that's a bit hard to accept and understand, because, well, it should be possible to have an objective outcome in terms of, okay, what will this do? And if we know for sure what it will do, then we can make a clear decision in terms of, okay, this is what we want or what we don't want. And because people are a bit scared, I think, of what the shift could entail, depending on where they want the system to go, they will posit certain outcomes as reality or not. And for us, it's impossible to know what is the truth. I don't have the financial means available to conduct economic research all on my own. Right? The only instances who have the power to do so are the instances with the vested interest. So as a result, every single study that I read, there's a grain of salt to be had on either side, I think. So it's a difficult conversation, but even only the fact that consumers already think that this is happening and that it's an instinctively right thing to do, and it will also help to combat fraud, I would argue, that to me would constitute already a sufficient reason to go for it, but not everybody agrees.
You also underline transparency as a core issue, like what do you think are the key areas where opacity persists, and what mechanism might meaningfully address these challenges?
A big problem indeed is transparency on all counts, right? So much is happening, there's so much data around, and there's already a lot of players with the financial means to structure and order those data, especially using Gen AI systems and so forth. Things are heading in the right direction. But a lot of data on the one hand is siloed, so there's big players with the funding to do the analysis. They have the data and are not necessarily inclined to share that data with the world, because obviously that data has commercial value, and they're going to do everything they can in order to keep it a secret, with a special regime for trade secrets as an important building block for their strategy in that context. And on the other hand, there's still a lot of opacity that is left to be uncovered in terms of the famous black box of streaming, whereby there's a question of what exactly happens between the streaming platforms and then the industry players. There's so much information, there's some information that's bound to be wrong, right? So there's also been a lot of different studies in terms of how much this black box amounts to. And also, again, depending on who you ask, it's 5% or 20% or 50% even of streaming revenue. And again, I don't know who to believe. So that's an important point. We don't really know. It's actually the question of how much untransparency there is a bit untransparent in itself, right? So that's a bit of a paradox as well. And then also, the link between artists and their commercial counterparties, there as well, there's a question of transparency. Once you know where the money goes to, the link between commercial counterparty and artists sometimes is also a bit tricky. So we've got different types of things that seek to remedy this. For example, a Spotify for artists, where you can see your dashboard and then see all of your streams and so forth. And we've got in the European Union the transparency requirement that requires the commercial counterparties to provide, at least on an annual basis, like a report with all of the exploitation information. But is it enough? Is it clear for people? It remains to be seen. So if you were to ask a musician with a contract with a commercial counterparty, what do you know on the basis of this annual report? Is it everything? I'm not completely convinced. And also this transparency, there's a question of how far it should go. Is it limited to, you've got this many streams and much money? Do you also have a right to the mailing list of your entire audience that's been subscribed to your newsletters? I would argue that in a time where electronic reachability of people is so important, that these emails, that this list of audience data in terms of which demographic do I most appeal to? Are they young people? Are they old people? Where are they from? What do they want from me? Do they want vinyl? Do they want cassette CD? This is all information that I think is available, but I do believe that it should go to the artists as well, in order for them to really make that conscious decision in terms of, okay, I want my music to get out there to the world. What contract do I need with which party? Because that is, in essence, the most important thing. If you empower musicians to know, okay, if I go there, then I got this for this amount of money. If I go there, this for this amount of money, this amount of information that flows back to me, then people can make informed decisions. And in the realm of contracts, that's the most important thing, I would say, informed consent. And as long as that is there, and the law does a little to help the weaker parts of the contract, then I think we're heading in the right direction.
And in speaking of contracts, what kind of power imbalances most affect contract negotiations in the streaming era? I think you've touched a few points, but
yeah, indeed, it's again, there's so many different types of players in the game on both sides, right? You've got starting artists of like 16 who just put out their first TikTok 30-second thing. And on the other hand, you've got the really big bands who've been around for ages. Also, a big difference in terms of the artist is the genre. And so if you ask a classical musician who's playing in like a Piazzolla string quintet, for example, is going to be a whole other direction than a punk band or an R&B star. We've got a very, very big amount of diversity on that side, but also on the other side. And that's something I think people sometimes forget. Yes, we've got the three majors, but in addition to that, we've got a really big and flourishing independent market. And there's also the do-it-yourself artists that really try to avoid commercial counterparties to bring their music to a bigger audience. So that being said, it's kind of hard to say, okay, which power imbalances are at play, because it's so case specific, right? So depending on a very specific situation, you will have a power imbalance or that is big or not. So that makes it hard for the laws intervene, because there are situations whereby the power balance is the other way around. For example, Taylor Swift and Billie Eilish, if they go into contract negotiations, well, you could say that they have the better hand to play. They have more leverage. So, but it's an answer that you will get from any lawyer. It's going to be, it depends, basically. It depends, and that makes it hard for the law, because the law is a one-size-fits-all type of thing. We need to be able to adapt it to every single situation, so it needs to be flexible, and at the same time, it needs to be transparent and fair and coherent and offer legal certainty. So that's a bit of another paradox that we can find within the law, but we're trying.
What structural or institutional change would you propose to strengthen artist right enforcement?
I'm a big fan of collective management, actually. Some people would disagree with me, but other people would agree with me. So that's the essence of taking a certain position in a debate, obviously. Collective management, collective action, collective bargaining, even though there's competition law constraints in relation to the latter, I think finding the collective voice of artists is a very important point, and I'm happy to note that there's a lot of instances already that are taking this really big challenge. So the collective management organizations on the one hand, and on the other hand also like the artist organizations such as like IPO Artis, that for the performing artist. And also the umbrella organizations of collective management organizations such as CISAC, such as GESAC, they really do play an important role into bringing important issues to the fore. So in terms of institutional changes, maybe I would like for them to have a bit of a better reputation sometimes. Like they do good work and they try very hard. Also in the context of Gen AI, opt-outs and so forth, they really do important work there. So I think that may be a first important point to make. And then also just trying to make sure that the information regarding what is out there in terms of legal help from the legal framework, that it is known by musicians. So one specific step that I regarded, but I thought it would be a good step to make is when the publisher of my book asked me whether I would allow my book to be scraped for the purposes of training a Gen AI model. I said yes, because I want for musicians who want the information to be able to use ChatGPT or another Gen AI model to find the relevant information. So if they want to know what the rules are on the basis of the European legal framework, specifically as applied in Belgium, France, the Netherlands and Germany, that they know and that they can make this informed decision. So those are the two things that I believe would be very, very important. And then, well, maybe thirdly, but I think it's going in a relatively good direction with the Gen AI debate. I think working together is going to be a very important point. Sometimes it's seen as like an us versus them debate, but as is always the case, working together will be very, very important. And in the Gen AI context, this is already occurring. But I think maybe there would be an option for this to apply on a broader level, because sometimes when I talk with the industry people, I get the impression that they think that the artists want to take everything. Well, that's not the case. They just want a fair streaming revenue. For example, now I think this morning I read this brief article about a case that is currently ongoing in the Netherlands, whereby a number of artists have filed proceedings against Universal in order to claim a more fair division of revenues. And I think we will see on the basis of where that case goes what more structural changes in the division model could be. If you ask me what the division should be in terms of royalties for streaming, I would personally say 50-50. 50% artist, 50% record company.
Okay.
And that is also the claim that's being made in that case in the Netherlands.
Yeah, and the last question is about international cooperation and shaping the streaming policy, like national laws And how do you envision future regulation adapting to emerging digital music technologies?
That's also a big question. There's a lot of different aspects at play, and a very important one to me is going to be the question of which law applies. Which court will have jurisdiction when a specific dispute arises. And in that context, so the European rules are quite beneficial to artists and more. And so what has been happening is contracts whereby people say, US law applies. In a bid to the buyouts, indeed, in a bid to basically have a workaround whereby the nicer rules don't apply anymore. So an important question will be how to counter that, and that's also something that we are working on to try and make sure that you can't just put a clause in the contract in order to avoid the EU framework from applying where it should apply. That's one thing. So private international law issues are going to be very important. And then also maybe a sense of realism, because, the law is always behind. We're fated to lag behind. So the only thing we can do is really try to keep up in a way. And it's not really a fun task to a certain extent. You always feel that you've decided at a certain point, okay, this is what I want the law to do now, and then poof, something new occurs, and then you have the same problems again. For example, me with my PhD, I thought, okay, I'm going to analyze copyright contract law to see how to make streaming fairer, and then the book is published. Gen AI, poof, Gen AI is not in my book, right? It's a new evolution. So if you're okay, how will we solve the fact that technology keeps on changing? We won't solve it, because it's our fate as lawyers to lag behind. But what we can try to do is try to keep up and try to stay in the game and look at what is happening in real life and then think fast, right? So when the motto of big tech is often move fast and break things, then maybe our motto should be think fast and try to. It's moving very fast, and we need to stay on the top of our game to make sure that the things don't remain broken, and that we try to fix things, so that we fix streaming. That's a very important point, and that then we try to fix the Gen AI debate as well. But we focus on one big debate at a time, because there's a lot of different interests at play, and it's a complex debate, so it requires complex.
Thank you so much, Jozefien. That's all our questions. You explained very well, actually, all the aspects. And
Perfect.
again, it's an amazing book, really.
Thank you very much.